I'm Belle, and I paid over $78,000 for my sister's dream wedding. I covered the venue, the flowers, even the napkins embossed with their initials in gold. Then, a week before the big day, I got a message. You're not invited. No one wants you there. But that wasn't even the worst part. They told people I was unstable. They erased me from the guest list, then from the family story entirely, like I never mattered at all. How does someone go from being the backbone to being a ghost? Would you have walked away? Because I didn't, not right away. But what I did next changed everything. Want to know how a family wedding became my breaking point? I landed in Charleston. Around 6 a.m., blurry-eyed and stiff from the red-eye flight out of Denver. I barely slept, half from the middle seat, half from the thoughts I couldn't shut off. I didn't check a bag. Just one carry-on with my dress for the engagement party and spreadsheet printouts. I brought more for my own sanity than necessity. It was muggy the second I stepped out of the airport, that familiar South Carolina heaviness clinging to my skin like obligation. I called a rideshare to take me to Magnolia Estate, the venue Mara couldn't stop gushing about for weeks. It's the most exclusive estate in Charleston, she had said. It's so fairy tale. It didn't feel like a fairy tale as I stood outside the iron gates, watching a group of bridesmaids in matching robes pose for photos. One of them laughed too loud, and I caught the end of a joke about someone's ex-husband. Not a single person looked in my direction. I adjusted the strap on my purse and walked in. At the check-in table, a young woman with a clipboard smiled politely but didn't look up for long. Last name, Greaves, I said. She paused, flipping through the list. Belle G. Her voice tilted like a question. Yes. Sister of the bride. Her face didn't change. You're at table 17, down the side hallway, just past the restrooms. It's the overflow section. Overflow. I didn't ask questions. I didn't react. I just nodded, took the name card, Belle G printed in slanted script, and walked toward the hallway with the floral wallpaper that smelled faintly of Clorox. My table sat near a swinging kitchen door. I could hear clattering dishes, muffled orders, the occasional burst of steam from the dishwasher. One chair had a broken leg, shimmed with a napkin. The table linen was wrinkled, no centerpiece, no place cards beyond mine. Across the room, table 1 glowed, crystal glasses, gold-trimmed plates. Mara sat there in full hair and makeup, clinking champagne with our parents. I could see Lorraine laughing at something Mara whispered in her ear. My father, Eldon, nodded like a man who had decided long ago not to intervene in women's affairs. I tried not to let it get to me. I really did. A server stopped by, glanced at my card, and asked, "Vendor check-in?" "No," I replied calmly, "just a guest." He nodded but didn't look me in the eye again. I sat, legs crossed tightly, watching as guests floated around the courtyard, like they were in a summer ad for J. Crew. I sipped water because no one offered me champagne. I smiled when someone passed by, someone I vaguely remembered from a family gathering years ago, but they didn't stop. Then came the toast. Mara stood at the head table, wine glass in hand. She looked radiant, flawless. Every detail from her ivory dress to the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear had been calculated for maximum aesthetic. I'd seen the budget lines. I'd approved half of them. "I just want to take a moment," she began, "to thank everyone who made today possible. To my incredible fiancé, to our wonderful parents, to my amazing bridesmaids, each of you is my heart." A pause, smiles, cheers, clapping. I waited just in case, but that was it. No mention of me. Not as a bridesmaid, not as a sister, certainly. Not as the one who wired $25,000 to the venue, the caterer, and the photographer 6 weeks ago so that she wouldn't lose the Griffin Estate booking window. Someone sitting nearby, a woman with a coral hat and a brooch shaped like a crab, leaned over and asked, "Are you one of the planners?" I looked at her, blinked once, then smiled. "No," I said, "I'm just her sister." She gave a small, embarrassed laugh. "Oh, you should be up there with the family." No, apparently not. I excused myself before the tears came. Not the kind you sob with, just the kind that sting quietly, the kind that leave a taste in your mouth like you've bitten down on something too sharp to swallow. I found the restroom and locked myself in a stall, even though no one had followed. I didn't need a mirror to tell me my lipstick was still intact, my dress still hung perfectly. Nothing had smudged or spilled, nothing visible anyway. From my purse, I pulled the spreadsheet, one of many. I flipped through the tabs: venue deposit, floral breakdown, lighting package, food tasting notes. Each one had my name in the paid by column. I folded the printout back into thirds, slid it into the envelope I kept tucked between my wallet and phone. I hadn't brought it for drama. I brought it to remind myself I hadn't imagined it, this invisible labor, the silent scaffolding I'd built around Mara's dream day. I looked down at my heels, polished, neutral, chosen specifically to not draw attention. I thought I came here to celebrate, I whispered to no one. Turns out I came to confirm what I already feared. I didn't sleep well that night. After the engagement party, I walked the edge of the venue until the lights started shutting off and the servers began folding tables. I kept my heels on just long enough to make it to the rideshare, then peeled them off in the back seat, one at a time like armor I could finally drop. The next morning, I set up my laptop on the corner desk of the Airbnb, poured some lukewarm motel-grade coffee into a ceramic mug that had a crack down the side, and started checking my work emails. I'd taken a few personal days to be in Charleston, but I needed something to feel solid under me again. Spreadsheets and predictable columns. Numbers don't lie. Families do. Right around 11 a.m., my phone rang. Lorraine. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but my thumb had already swiped before my mind caught up. "Hi, honey," she said, her tone syrupy, which always meant something was coming. "Did you get back all right last night?" "I did. I know things were a little hectic yesterday. Lots of moving parts." I didn't say anything. She continued. "Just wanted to mention something before the next big event. If anyone asks about the wedding costs, maybe just say it was a collective effort. Everyone pitched in. Mara wants to keep the focus on the couple." I blinked, stared at my screen. "You mean lie?" A pause. "It's not about lying. It's about keeping things elegant, simple." I clicked on one of my Excel tabs, Vendor Master Breakdown. My initials were stamped across every major expense: the venue, catering, florals, rentals, even the monogrammed linens Mara insisted she had to have. "Belle?" my mother asked. "I heard you," I said loud and clear. "Well, we just want everyone to feel included, that's all." Included, I thought, without acknowledgement. We hung up a few minutes later, the conversation ending not with resolution, but with that quiet static that fills the space between people who stopped really hearing each other years ago. Later that afternoon, while trying to forget the call, I opened Instagram to mindlessly scroll until a white robe and pink backdrop caught my eye. Mara, sitting in the middle of a high-end spa room, surrounded by 6 women in identical robes, sipping champagne. The caption read, "Spa day with the bride's best sisters, #Griffin Bride vibes." I blinked, then looked again, just in case I had missed a tag. Nothing. I checked my email, my texts. No invite, no heads up, no casual, "Hey, come by if you're free." I texted Mara anyway. "Looks like a fun day, hope you enjoyed it." Hours passed before a response finally buzzed on my phone. "You've been so slammed with work. I didn't want to put more on your plate. Figured you'd rather rest anyway, right?" Rest. A few days later, I saw another group thread on WhatsApp. Bridesmaids coordinating charm bracelets for the bridal brunch. Little sterling silver initials custom made. I recognized them because I designed the layout myself, approved the invoice, and paid for the entire gift set weeks ago. Mara had asked me to take care of it because she was swamped. Now, in the thread, the girls were gushing about how sweet it was that Mara got them these. I forwarded the image to my mother. Beneath it, I added, "I paid for this. Mara's telling them she did." She saw the message. Didn't respond. I didn't follow up. I knew that silence that wasn't the "I forgot to reply" kind of silence. That was the "I've decided your feelings are inconvenient" kind. That evening, I walked alone down King Street, letting the sound of distant street musicians and the clink of patio wine glasses wash over me like I wasn't even part of the city anymore. Charleston always felt like a place trying too hard to charm you into submission. Bougainvillea on every balcony, cobblestones that ruined your shoes but looked great in engagement photos. I bought a scoop of pistachio gelato from a corner shop Mara, and I used to share that flavor every summer when we were kids. One spoon, two mouths, one argument about who got the last bite. It used to be one of those things that made us feel like sisters. Now I sat on a public bench eating it alone. People passed by, laughing, arms linked, sipping from to-go wine cups, as if the world didn't hold grudges or secrets or the kind of unspoken erasures that followed you into sleep. I took another bite, let the cold dull the ache behind my eyes. And I thought, not for the first time, that maybe it wasn't about being excluded. Maybe it was worse. Maybe I was being rewritten. The gelato had melted into a sweet puddle by the time I tossed the cup in a public trash can and started walking again. Charleston evenings had a way of looking peaceful, even when your insides were in open revolt. I passed a couple dancing barefoot in a courtyard lit with string lights. They clapped along to a jazz quartet like they didn't have a care in the world. I envied that ease, not because I wanted to be them, but because I couldn't remember the last time I moved through a space without calculating who had just erased me from it. The next morning, I drove to the wedding planner's office. I'd emailed earlier that week to confirm the floral adjustments I'd funded. Mara had changed her mind on the table runners again, and I figured dropping off the revised deposit form in person would give me a sliver of control, even if only on paper. I got there a few minutes before our scheduled time. The receptionist was still arranging binders and coffee cups when I arrived, so she asked me to wait in the side lounge. The planner's office wasn't grand, definitely not Griffin Estate level, but it was tasteful, pastel file folders, a corkboard of seating layouts, a massive wall calendar marked with things like Mara Final Walkthrough in glitter ink. I took a seat just outside the main room. That's when I heard Mara's voice, piped in through speakerphone, unfiltered and too clear. Honestly, Belle is driving me nuts, she said. She wants spreadsheets for every flower stem. Who needs Excel for roses? I love her, but she's obsessive. I just want her to step back and let me plan my wedding my way. There was a beat of silence. Then the planner chuckled nervously. Well, she's been really involved. Too involved. Mara cut in. She's turning everything into a work project. It's exhausting. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. Just sat there like someone had poured concrete in my shoes. Eventually, the door creaked open and the receptionist peeked in. You can come in now. I stood up slowly, my face blank, hands still holding the deposit envelope. Mara wasn't on the call anymore when I entered the room, but the planner's expression was just a bit too careful. She smiled too much. She overcompensated, which told me everything. I handed over the documents, thanked her politely, and left. No confrontation, no speech, not even a raised eyebrow. On the way to my rental, I passed the old seafood place Mara and I used to love when we were kids. We'd fight over hush puppies and dare each other to eat raw oysters. Now it just looked like another building I didn't belong to anymore. That night we had a family dinner at a restaurant Lorraine picked, one of those places with too many forks and not enough flavor. Everyone was there. Mara, our parents, Bradley's mother Patricia, and a few bridesmaids who talked more about Napa wine pairings than anything remotely personal. Mara acted sugary sweet the whole evening, touched my shoulder when she walked by, called me bear in front of the table like we were still 6 and sharing a bunk bed. Lorraine raised her glass halfway through the meal to Mara's beautiful vision. This wedding is already unforgettable. Everyone clinked. No one mentioned who had paid for the linen upgrades or expedited the RSVP site when Mara missed her deadline. I waited until the plates were being cleared before asking, did the planner get the updated floral contract I emailed Tuesday? She said she hadn't heard back. Mara took a delicate sip of wine, then smiled. Oh, we actually decided to go with my florist team. They had more experience with the layout. Hope that's okay. I nodded. Sure. No one looked up. No one asked for clarification. They just moved on. I chewed slowly, swallowed, and said nothing else for the rest of the meal. It was easier than pretending. The next blow came 2 days later. I'd spent an hour drafting a short speech, 3 minutes tops, for the rehearsal dinner. Something warm but not too emotional, just enough to say I was here, I saw her grow up, I mattered. I had even printed it out to edit by hand, old habits. Then came the email. It was a group thread from the planner. Attached is the updated dinner run of show. Kimberly will be delivering the sibling toast, representing both sisters. Kimberly. Mara's college roommate, the same one who once drunkenly told me I had firstborn energy despite being the youngest. I scrolled through the email in disbelief, opened the attachment, and there it was, under sibling remarks, prepared by Belgreaves. Forwarded as suggestions to be delivered by Kimberly A. I stared at the screen for a full minute. No heartbeat, no reaction. The next evening, at the rehearsal dinner, Kimberly stood in a lavender dress and read my speech. My pauses, my personal anecdotes, my closing line about Mara's laugh sounding like it never outgrew childhood. Everyone applauded. Mara beamed. I stayed in the back, hands folded, face serene. No one noticed. When I got back to the rental that night, I opened my laptop to write. I didn't want to forget the feeling, not to wallow, but to name it. I typed, "Being left out stings." But hearing your own words spoken by someone else as if they were never yours, that wounds something deeper. They don't just want me silent, they want me ghosted. They want to keep the parts of me they find useful and erase the rest. Then I hit delete, all of it, no copy, no autosave, just gone. I looked in the mirror above the kitchen sink and watched my own face not flinch. Maybe this was how it began. Not with shouting or confrontation, but with the quiet decision to stop asking for a seat at the table and start asking why I built it for them in the first place. After I closed my laptop that night, I didn't turn on the TV or even check the weather for the next day like I usually do. I just sat at the little round table in the Airbnb kitchen, staring out the slatted blinds at a street lamp that buzzed faintly. The longer I sat there, the more something hardened inside me. Not rage, not sadness, just this slow, quiet understanding that I had been repositioned, and not by accident. The next morning, I opened my email and found 2 new vendor receipts. Waiting in my inbox, both addressed to me directly, both showing confirmation of payments I'd made weeks earlier. One was from the florist, confirming final details and payment in full for the ceremony aisle runners and reception arrangements. The total, $7,600. The other was from the dessert vendor, thanking me for the $3,200 deposit on the custom cake display and specialty pastries Mara insisted she couldn't live without. I stared at the screen, then clicked through my bank app. The withdrawals were there. I'd paid. But nobody had said a word to me about confirmations, final designs, delivery times, nothing. Before I let myself spiral, I called Mara. She picked up after 2 rings, all breathy and cheerful. "Hey, Belle. I was just about to text you. You'll never believe what Patricia said about the rehearsal dress." "Did James handle the cake, or was that me again?" Silence. "Then he's dealing with the honeymoon, Belle, don't be petty." "I'm not being petty. I'm asking a yes or no question." "He's contributing in his own way. Can we not do this right now?" "Sure," I said and hung up. That afternoon, I went to the pre-wedding brunch at one of those garden courtyards with fountains that trickle water just loud enough to drown awkward silences. I'd shown up because I was expected to, because being physically present still counted for something, I thought. Turns out I was wrong. Near the entryway, on a linen-covered table with a sign that read "Gifts and Blessings," sat a watercolor painting of the Charleston Bridge. It was framed in gold and featured Mara and James' names in delicate calligraphy at the bottom. I recognized it immediately. I had commissioned it from an artist in Denver, emailed the exact font style, and paid an extra rush fee to have it shipped overnight. Below it was a card, a heartfelt gift from Aunt Meredith, the bride's mentor and inspiration. My stomach turned in a slow, almost polite way. I walked inside and found Lorraine near the mimosa bar. "Mom," I said quietly, "that painting is from me." She blinked. "What? The one at the front? I had it made. I sent it here." "It's mine." She reached for her glass. "Mara thought it would be simpler this way. Meredith's already." Hosting the prayer circle later, let her have this moment. That wasn't the question. Belle, please, it's just a detail. No, I said, it's my name. She didn't answer. She just moved on, chatting with a neighbor about her new lawn service. Back at the Airbnb that evening, I did what I always do when my gut tells me something and I need confirmation. I opened the numbers laptop out, receipts on the table. I started sorting through each one, the venue, the photographer, the rentals, every dollar I'd fronted. Some were deposits, some final payments, but all of them had one thing in common. My name on the line that read, billing contact. Then I started scanning email threads, subject lines like, thanks for managing this on behalf of the family, and let us know if Belle needs anything further to process for the Rome side. The Rand side, James' family, the side that hadn't contributed a cent to anything except apparently vibes. And yet here I was funding, coordinating, emailing, and still being referred to as an assistant, not a sister. At some point, I stopped printing out the confirmations. It didn't matter anymore. I knew what I was looking at, not oversight, not miscommunication, reassignment. This wasn't about giving credit where credit was due. It was about quietly transferring my presence to more convenient names, ones who looked better in photos, ones who wouldn't ask where their name had gone. The next day, I took a walk down the shops on King Street, not because I needed anything, just to move, to get away from the spreadsheets and the silence of an empty rental. In one of the boutiques, I passed a card stand, one of those displays, with overpriced wisdom quotes on thick paper stock. A card caught my eye. Sometimes love means leaving the table where respect is no longer served. I didn't buy it, but I took a photo. I walked the rest of the street in slow loops, ignoring texts from the planner and a voicemail from my aunt asking if I'd confirmed the chair rental for the ceremony. Later, I'd respond with the same line I'd been giving everyone for days. Let me check on that. But something had shifted. If they wanted my silence, they had it. If they wanted my absence, they were getting close to earning that too. The sun had already dipped below the horizon when I got back to the Airbnb. I left my sandals by the door, took off my earrings with the precision of someone peeling off expectations, and opened my laptop. I didn't even bother changing out of the dress I'd worn all day. I needed something to hold on to, something that would make what I felt make sense. That's when I saw it. A new email from the event coordinator. CC'd by mistake, clearly because I was not the intended audience. The message chain stretched long, forwarded between Mara, the planner, and someone from the Rand family's estate office. I skimmed down until I landed on a line highlighted in yellow. As long as the unstable sister isn't in attendance, we'll issue the check by end of week. Right above it in Mara's email, she had thanked the Rands for stepping in to help cover the final costs, assuring them that everything will go smoothly from here. The subject line read, Roan contribution $50,000 release. I read the sentence again and again. It wasn't the amount that knocked the air out of me. It was the word unstable, like someone had plucked it off a shelf full of lazy smears and decided it would work just fine for me. No one corrected it, no one pushed back. That silence said everything. I stood up and walked to the kitchen, poured water into a glass too fast, and spilled some onto the counter. I didn't clean it right away. I just stared at the droplets, waiting for my pulse to come down. Then I picked up my phone and called my mother. She answered on the second ring. Hi, sweetheart, she said, too brightly. Everything okay? I didn't waste time. I just read the email about the Rand's contribution, the part where I'm described as unstable. Silence. Mom, she sighed. Belle, this wedding is already under a microscope. Mara's been under so much stress. Her future in-laws have very strong opinions. So you sold me out, I said flatly. For a venue upgrade? Don't be dramatic, she replied. It wasn't like that. I didn't raise my voice. How was it then? Another pause. You've been very intense lately, emotional. They picked up on that. I clenched my jaw. I've been paying for your other daughter's fantasy wedding alone, and you still found a way to spin me as the problem. You're twisting this. No, Mom, I said. I'm finally untwisting it. She said nothing. I continued, calm as I could manage. I've paid for 70% of this event. If I pulled out tomorrow, the whole thing would collapse. That would be cruel, she said, voice sharp. Now you wouldn't do that to your sister. I laughed once. Cruel? You called me unstable in writing and offered me up to be erased, and I'm the cruel one. Belle, I'm not making threats. I'm setting terms, I said. If I'm not welcome, then my money's not either. She exhaled a long breath meant to imply exhaustion. You always make things harder than they have to be. No, you make them easy for Mara. I just stopped pretending that was fair. I hung up before she could respond. By midnight, I drafted the email. Not a text, not a phone call. A full, proper message, sent to Mara, Lorraine, my father, and the wedding planner. I gave it a subject line that was hard to misinterpret. Subject: remaining balance contingency. The body was short, deliberate. If I am not welcome to attend, I will not fund what I cannot witness. Let me know your final guest list. My contributions stop with my exclusion. I didn't wait for a reply. I didn't check to see if it was read. I closed the laptop and let the message sit in their inboxes. Like a mirror none of them wanted to look into. I sat in bed afterward, not exhausted, not wired, just clear. People always say you shouldn't make decisions while angry, but this wasn't anger. It was understanding, the kind that arrived late, like a dinner guest you didn't expect. But once they showed up, everything made sense. They wanted me quiet, not erased. But the moment they called me unstable to make themselves more comfortable, they stopped being my family, and I stopped being their bank. The next morning, I was in the middle of a virtual call with 2 corporate clients when my phone started vibrating across the desk. Once, then again, 5 rapid buzzes in under a minute. I tried to ignore it, tried to focus on explaining a portfolio strategy that suddenly felt meaningless. But something in my chest knew, the kind of knowing that presses into your rib cage before your mind catches up. I clicked mute, offered a polite, "I'm going to need 5 minutes," and turned off the camera. I picked up the phone and scanned the notifications, all from Lorraine. First message: we need to talk about the wedding. Then, there's been a change of plans. And then the third: you're not invited. Mara needs peace. No one wants you there. I didn't gasp. I didn't even blink. I just felt something behind my sternum shift, like a lock turning. I stepped into the hallway of the rental and leaned against the wall, not for support, just distance from whatever version of myself still believed they could surprise me. I dialed her number. She answered like she'd just gotten back from a walk in the park. "Hey, sweetie," she chirped. "You got my message?" "I did," I said. My voice was steady. I wasn't sure how. "Well, you've made things a little tense, Belle. This is such a fragile moment for Mara, and James's parents, well, they've expressed some concerns." I didn't interrupt. Let her hang herself with politeness. "She deserves a peaceful day," she continued. "A clean slate." "Right," I said. "So you cut out the person who paid for the foundation." She hesitated. "You know it's not about the money." "It's always about the money, Mom. You just don't like saying it out loud." She exhaled. "Don't be vindictive." "Vindictive?" I repeated. "Is that what you're calling boundaries now?" "Belle, please, this wedding is a reflection of our family. You made yourself difficult." James's father was uncomfortable. "You were asking too many questions." Questions like, why am I the only one writing checks? She was quiet. I continued, "You know I've covered $78,000 of this wedding. Not pledged, paid, deposits, final invoices, tips, delivery fees. And now I'm too inconvenient to be in the pictures." "You're not being erased," she said quickly. "You're being asked to respect what Mara needs right now." "You mean silence?" She didn't reply. I ended the call before she could spin it further. Back inside, I sat down at the dining table and laid out everything I had. Contracts, receipts, bank transfer screenshots. I opened my laptop, logged into the vendor portal I'd been using for months. No tears, no second guessing. I started with the venue. I pulled up the Griffin Estate account, opened the clause marked 72-hour hold and freeze, and clicked the checkbox. Next, the caterer. Deposit submitted in full under my name. I initiated a refund on the secondary package upgrades and froze. Payment on the wine selection. Then the photographer, payment plans scheduled through me. Pause the string quartet, the luxury bathrooms, the late-night coffee bar. Line by line. No emotion, just data. I was in control again. I paused only once when the final confirmation box popped up. Are you sure you want to pause all active payments? Pending services will be suspended. I clicked yes, then I crafted the email. It wasn't long, just enough to clarify without explaining. I copied Mara, Lorraine, Eldon, and the planner. Subject: payment hold initiated, contingent on guest status. Body: as discussed, until my status as a guest is confirmed, all pending. Payments and remaining balance transfers will be held. This includes final vendor disbursements, gratuities, and extras. Thank you for your understanding. I added a PDF summary of all charges paid to date, every line item, every wire transfer, all signed in my name. Then I hit send. I sat back and watched the cursor spin, the email go out. There was no rush of victory, no catharsis, just breath, just space, and a silence I finally chose for myself. I closed the laptop, stood up, and walked to the window. The sun had started dipping below the rooftops again, casting orange across the palms outside. They thought cutting me out would stop me from mattering. But what they didn't expect, what they never bothered to calculate, was that I still held the blueprint. They uninvited me, but I still owned the tent they planned to get married under. The silence after sending that email didn't last long. Less than 12 hours later, a notification blinked on my phone just after I'd finished pouring myself a cup of black coffee. The subject line was short: regarding program review. I opened it before I could second-guess the familiar name in the sender field. It wasn't from Mara. It was from my mother. The message started politely. "Hi, Belle, I hope you're well." As though we hadn't just dismantled decades of trust in a single phone call. And then came the correction, the reframe, the demand. "Please understand that your recent decisions have created confusion. This isn't about exclusion. It's about harmony. We had to make adjustments to preserve the peace. I hope you'll reconsider this financial stand for the family's sake. Not for her sister's sake or for the truth, but for the family's sake." I didn't reply. Not then. Instead, I forwarded it to my financial advisor, added it to the vendor documentation folder, and logged out of my email. There was nothing else to discuss until they acknowledged I wasn't just a line item on the budget. Later that afternoon, while organizing my digital files, another email slipped through. It was from the custom program vendor. The subject line read, "Final mock-up wedding day booklet." I wasn't supposed to be copied on it, but I had been, likely due to the original thread where I'd submitted the initial RSVP info back in May. I opened the PDF. The cover featured a photo of Mara and James from their engagement shoot, sun-drenched and overly edited. Inside were bios of the bridal party, the schedule of events, the menu, and a special thanks section. When I reached the back page, I froze. Under family sponsors, it read, "Belle G, family acquaintance partial. Supporter. Not sister, not guest, not even Belle Greaves. Just a footnote. Just enough to say I existed, but not enough to admit how." I zoomed in on the text, screenshot the section, and stared at it for several minutes. My name had been sanitized. My role blurred to the point of being a rumor. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I just stood there with my hands flat on the table, like I was bracing for an earthquake that had already happened. Then I picked up the phone and called Aunt Vera. She answered with a hesitant, "Hello," like she already knew what was coming. "Did you know?" I asked, skipping pleasantries. There was a pause, then a sigh. I saw the draft at the brunch. I wanted to say something, I swear I did. I sat down slowly. But your mother gave me a look across the room that told me everything I needed to know. I didn't want to make it worse. "You didn't want to make it worse?" I repeated, more to myself than her. "I'm sorry, Belle. I don't agree with what they're doing, but I also didn't stop it." "That's on me." I thanked her and hung up. I didn't need apologies, I needed witnesses. And at least she was honest enough to be one. Back at my laptop, I attached the screenshot to a new email addressed to both my legal advisor and financial planner. Subject: Misrepresentation of identity and contributions. Body. Attached is a copy of the program draft submitted to guests. Please advise regarding options for responding to the reclassification of my status and financial contributions. Also requesting prep for full contract withdrawal under 48-hour clause. That last line I typed slowly, deliberately. Then I highlighted the row on my spreadsheet labeled Final Transfer, Marquee, and Tent Rental, and marked it red. It was time. At 10:04 a.m. the next morning, I sent my final message to the planning team, Mara, and both my parents. Subject: Program Review and Final Terms. Body: as per attached materials and my removal from all ceremonial acknowledgments. This message serves as official notice that all future financial support is hereby terminated, effective immediately. Remaining disbursements, fees, and bonuses are no longer authorized for payment via my accounts. Vendors will be updated accordingly. Consider this final. I didn't wait for their reaction. I closed my shared cloud folder where I had kept every itinerary, diagram, and vendor contact for the last 5 months, and hit delete. Gone. All of it. No archive, no downloads. No room for negotiation. They wrote me out of their story, so I finished. The sentence. I didn't sleep the night I sent that email. I didn't pace or cry or stare at the ceiling asking the universe for fairness. It had already answered. I just lay there, still watching the minutes blink by on the digital clock across the room. And when the first hint of light crept in under the blinds, I got up, brewed a cup of coffee, and waited. By 8:13 a.m., the responses started coming in. The venue coordinator was the first. Her message was polite but puzzled. Hi, Belle, we just received a hold request on the account. Can you confirm whether this is accurate? The final walkthrough is scheduled for today. I replied quickly. Confirmed. Funding has been rescinded. I'm no longer associated with the event. She didn't ask why, just thanked me and said she'd informed the estate manager. Next came the caterer, the florist, the lighting team. All of them wanted the same thing, clarity. And I gave it. Short, precise, professional. I explained that the financial source had been withdrawn due to a change in participation status and that any future arrangements would need to be handled by a new party. Not once did I use the word bride. Not once did I mention Mara. The vendors responded with more grace than my own family had. Several said they understood. One thanked me for my organization and promptness, a sentence that stung for reasons I couldn't explain. By noon, the Griffin estate had locked the date, citing non-payment. The window for the remaining balance had closed without a transfer. That meant they were free to open the slot to another couple if payment didn't arrive by end of day. And then came the call. Mara. Her name flashed across the screen as I sat in the sunroom sipping iced tea I didn't even want. I let it ring. Until the 4th time before picking up. She didn't waste breath. What the hell are you doing? She snapped. You're ruining everything. I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes. No, Mara, I'm not ruining anything. I'm just no longer paying for something I wasn't welcome to attend. You know this isn't about that. You're making this about you. I didn't send the text that said, no one wants you there. That wasn't me. There was a beat of silence on the other end. She shifted. I could hear the panic rising behind her voice. Do you have any idea how bad this looks? The vendors are dropping out. People are asking questions. Then, tell them the truth, I said softly. Tell them your sister funded 70% of your wedding and you kicked her out for the sake of appearances. I didn't kick you out, she protested. Mom handled that. You know how she is. She said it would be less stressful for everyone. But you didn't stop her, I replied, because less stress for everyone meant more comfort for you. There was a pause again, then her voice dropped to something almost a whisper. I can't fix this now. Everything's collapsing. Are you happy? No, I said, but I am finished. She hung up. I stared at the screen for a few seconds before setting the phone down and walking to the kitchen. I opened the fridge, pulled out leftover salad, and forced myself to eat. I chewed through every bite like it was a chore that would get me to the next moment. That afternoon, Mara posted something on Instagram, a photo of the estate's iron gates captioned, "Even family can disappoint you. Weddings show people's true colors." The comments lit up in minutes, Friends offering support, vague responses. From acquaintances, one from a distant cousin. Wanna talk? You deserve joy no matter what. I didn't comment. I didn't reach out. I didn't care to explain. But a few hours later, my cousin Rachel called. She was the only one I picked up for. Belle, she said without preamble. What's going on? I've gotten 3 texts asking if the wedding's been cancelled. I leaned against the kitchen counter.
It hasn't, not yet. They said you pulled out your funding. I did. Why?
She wanted the date to be hers, I said. I gave her exactly that. Rachel was quiet for a moment, then, good for you. That evening, just before sunset, I'd packed a small tote bag with the wedding folder I'd been building since. April hard copies of every receipt, every signed contract, a few sticky notes with vendor contact numbers. I drove to the edge of Charleston to a small sandy beach near Folly. It was quiet, empty, the kind of place people passed on the way to somewhere else. I brought the portable fire pit from the back of the car, set it up in a safe spot with a lighter and kindling. The folder sat heavy in my hands, not just paper, but proof of effort, of love, of belief in a version of my family that clearly didn't include me anymore. I sat cross-legged in front of the fire pit, lit it, watched the flames catch. And one by one I fed the documents into it, the floral contracts, the RSVP spreadsheets, the vendor summaries. The seating chart I never got a seat on. I didn't cry. I didn't whisper affirmations. I didn't make it ceremonial. But in the crackle of burning paper, in the way the edges curled and the ink vanished, something lifted from me. It wasn't revenge, it was a release. A ritual I didn't know. I needed until it was done. I wasn't burning a bridge. I was marking the boundary they crossed. 2 weeks passed, enough time for people to stop whispering in corners and start pretending nothing ever happened. I had left Charleston the day after the fire on the beach, packed a single suitcase, turned in the keys to the Airbnb, and boarded. A one-way flight to Santa Fe. There wasn't some dramatic goodbye. Just the soft thunk of the door locking behind me and the quiet hum of knowing I would not be back. Not for holidays, not for birthdays. Not until the weight of their silence could no longer be used as a weapon. Santa Fe welcomed me the way a quiet room does after days of noise. I stayed with an old friend for a few nights until I found a short-term rental near the plaza. It was small bare walls, one creaky chair, a mattress on the floor, but it was mine. Mine in the way nothing had been for months. I spent the first few days walking everywhere. Coffee shops, used bookstores, the Sunday artisan market. No one knew my name. No one asked what I did for a living or if I was the bride's sister. There were no questions wrapped in judgment, just nods from strangers and the kind of stillness that lets your shoulders drop without noticing. That's when the letter came, not an email, not a text. A real letter, sent in a pale blue envelope. Forwarded by my Aunt Vera, with my mother's handwriting across the front. I almost didn't open it, but I did. Inside was a folded piece of stationery, monogrammed with Loren's initials. The ink was the same shade of navy she'd always used for Christmas cards, bold, exact, unyielding. We didn't know how else to protect Mara, it began. We were told you were having episodes, that you were struggling. We didn't want to make things worse. I read it twice, then a third time. They didn't say I was difficult. They didn't say I was upset. They said I was unstable. That's how you erase a woman, not with confrontation. With concern, with carefully chosen words that sound like care but feel like exile. I folded the letter and set it aside. Later that morning, I walked down to the corner cafe and took my laptop with me. I answered emails, checked in with a nonprofit I'd agreed to consult for. The work was easy, budget reviews, resource planning, small grants. It felt good to be useful again, and not in a way that would be repackaged and renamed by someone else. On weekends, I volunteered at a community center nearby, helping teenage girls learn how to track spending and open their first checking accounts. We used fake dollar bills and ran budgeting simulations. One girl, maybe 15, asked if I'd ever made a financial mistake. Once, I said. I trusted people who told me to stay quiet. That night, I pulled out a stack of thank you cards I'd bought at a gas station and started writing. One went to the venue coordinator who treated me with dignity even as she processed my withdrawal. One to the florist who had emailed me privately to say she understood. One to the young girl from catering who slipped me a Diet Coke while everyone else sipped champagne. I didn't know if they'd even remember me, but I wanted them to know I remembered being seen. I heard bits and pieces about the wedding afterward. Apparently, Mara held the ceremony at a smaller venue. Some friends said it was rushed, that half the vendors dropped out, that Patricia Rand stepped in to cover what she could but wouldn't allow a reschedule. One cousin who attended texted me a few days later. She looked beautiful but exhausted. James barely spoke to anyone. Lorraine started calling again, once a week, then every few days. I let most of them go to voicemail. When I did respond, it was with short, neutral texts. Yes, I'm okay. Work is steady. No, I'm not coming back for Thanksgiving. Eldon didn't call. Mara didn't either. There were whispers floating through extended family that I'd had a bit of a breakdown. But the more time passed, the more people began to question it, not because I defended myself, but because I stopped engaging. And sometimes silence reveals more than denial ever could. One morning I hiked up to a ridge just outside of town. The trail wasn't long, but the incline made my legs ache in a way I welcomed. At the top, I sat on a flat rock and pulled out the last piece of wedding memorabilia. I'd kept a torn invitation. It was still addressed to Belgie, no last name, no title, just initials. Like I was some placeholder for a guest they never expected to show. I looked at it for a long time. Then I tore it once, right down the middle, and let the two pieces catch the wind. They fluttered out over the canyon, small and weightless, disappearing into a horizon that didn't ask for explanations. The worst part wasn't that I wasn't wanted. It was that I believed them, that I adjusted myself to fit the mold of someone who could be overlooked, repackaged, quietly erased. Now I know better. And that doesn't make the wound vanish, but it makes it mine to carry, not theirs to reopen. I walked back down the trail slowly, taking in every step, not because I was broken, but because this time no one was rushing me to forgive or forget. The months that followed solidified my new reality. Santa Fe became more than a temporary escape, it became home. I found a small, charming house with a porch that overlooked the high desert, where sunsets painted the sky in hues I never knew existed. My work consulting for nonprofits grew, allowing me to use my financial acumen for causes I genuinely cared about, building things up instead of watching them crumble. The budgeting workshops for teenagers expanded, and I started a small fund to help young women cover initial costs for college applications or trade school certifications. It was fulfilling, tangible work, where my contributions were acknowledged and valued. My phone still occasionally buzzed with a message from a distant relative, usually about an upcoming family event, but I no longer felt the compulsion to attend. The silence from Mara, Lorraine, and Eldon was mostly unbroken, a stark testament to the true nature of their affection. There was no grand apology, no heartfelt plea for reconciliation. Just the quiet understanding that the family dynamic I had tried so desperately to hold together was never truly stable, only held in place by my financial scaffolding. One day, almost a year after the wedding fiasco, I received a package. It was a small velvet-covered box. Inside, nestled on a satin lining, was a sterling silver charm bracelet. Each charm was a tiny initial, M, J, L, E, and then a single delicate B. It wasn't custom-made like the ones I had designed and paid for. This one was mass-produced, a token gesture. There was no note, but I knew it was from Mara. I held it for a moment, feeling the cold metal against my palm. The charm for a bell was slightly tarnished, as if it had been handled often, perhaps in moments of quiet contemplation on her part. A fleeting thought crossed my mind. Could this be an olive branch? A subtle acknowledgement. I walked out to my porch, the Santa Fe sun warm on my skin. I looked at the bracelet, then out at the endless horizon. The old belle, the one who craved acceptance and fought for her place, might have grasped onto this. She might have reached out, hoping for a conversation, a chance to mend. But the new belle, The one who had learned to set boundaries and value her own peace, knew better. The bracelet was a gesture perhaps, but it offered no apology, no acknowledgement of the pain or the erasure. It was an attempt to fit me back into a narrative that had already discarded me. I placed the bracelet gently on the porch railing, letting the desert wind catch it. It clinked softly against the wood, a faint echo of a past that no longer defined me. I wasn't angry, not anymore. I wasn't even sad. There was just a profound sense of calm, a quiet triumph in having chosen myself. I had paid for a wedding, but in walking away, I had bought something far more valuable, my freedom. And that, I realized, was a price I would pay 1,000,000 times over.